Snow screamed beneath their skis as the wind cut through wool and courage alike. And in the frozen silence of a Norwegian mountain night, a small group of ordinary men prepared to challenge the most terrifying dream of the Nazi war machine. This is not just a story about war. This is a story about fear, faith, and a handful of shadows who believed that if they failed, the future of the world would burn in atomic fire. Before we dive deeper into this incredible true story, if you love hidden history, untold war missions, and real-life heroism that feels like a movie, make sure you subscribe and stay with us, because every video here uncovers another moment that changed the world forever. In the early 1940s, Europe was on its knees. Hitler's armies were marching across the continent, cities were falling, and whispers of a secret weapon began to circulate among Allied intelligence. This was not just another bomb. This was something far more dangerous. Scientists in Nazi-controlled territory were working on nuclear fission, a force powerful enough to turn entire cities into ash in a single moment. If Germany succeeded, the war would not just be lost. History itself would be rewritten in fire. High in the mountains of Norway, in a quiet industrial town called Vemork, stood a hydroelectric plant that looked harmless from a distance. It produced heavy water, a strange-sounding substance that most people had never heard of. But in the world of nuclear science, heavy water was priceless. It was a key ingredient in slowing down nuclear reactions, making it essential for building a functioning atomic reactor. Without it, Hitler's nuclear dream would stall. With it, the nightmare could become real. The Nazis knew this. They guarded the plant like a fortress. Armed patrols, watchtowers, and deadly terrain protected it. The surrounding landscape was a frozen maze of cliffs, rivers, and deep ravines that swallowed sound and life alike. Any attack from the air had failed. Bombers missed their targets or caused only minor damage. The plant kept running. The heavy water kept flowing. Time was running out. That's when the Allies turned to a different kind of weapon. Not planes, not tanks, but people. They were young. Some were barely more than boys. They were Norwegian resistance fighters who knew these mountains like their own. Heartbeat, skiers, climbers, farmers, students, men who had grown up in snow and silence. Their leader, Joachim Rundberg, did not look like a legendary hero. He looked like someone you might pass in a village market. But behind his calm eyes burned a quiet determination that could survive any storm. Their mission was simple to explain and nearly impossible to survive. Ski across hundreds of kilometers of frozen wilderness. Avoid German patrols. Descend into a heavily guarded industrial site. Destroy the heavy water production system. Escape into the night. No backup, no air support, no second chance. They traveled under moonlight, their breath forming ghostly clouds in the freezing air. Hunger gnawed at them. Frostbitten fingers clutched ski poles and weapons. At night, they slept in shallow snow caves, listening for the distant crunch of boots that might signal the end. Every sound felt like death approaching. As they neared the target, the land itself seemed to fight them. A deep gorge surrounded the plant, its icy river roaring below like a warning. The only bridge was heavily guarded. Any attempt to cross it would be suicide. So they chose the impossible. They climbed down into the ravine in total darkness, using ropes and frozen roots, slipping on ice, knowing that one mistake meant a silent fall into the black water far below. At the bottom, soaked and shaking, they crossed the river, then climbed up the other side, their muscles screaming in protest. By the time they reached the plant's fence, their bodies were breaking, but their will was unshaken. Inside the facility, German guards laughed and smoked, unaware that history was standing just meters away in the shadows. The commandos cut through barriers and slipped into the building where the heavy water tanks were stored. The air smelled of metal and chemicals. Their hands moved quickly, placing explosives with careful precision. They left behind a small weapon as well, a silent message to show this was no random act, but a deliberate strike against the heart of the Nazi war effort. As the final charges were set, time seemed to freeze. Each second felt like a lifetime. Then they ran. The explosion ripped through the night, shattering the calm with thunder and flame. The heavy water production system was destroyed. Pipes burst, tanks collapsed. The plant was crippled. But the mission wasn't over. Now came the hardest part. Escape. German alarms screamed across the valley. Soldiers poured out, rifles in hand, dogs barking, lights sweeping across the snow. The saboteurs split into groups, skiing into the wilderness like ghosts vanishing into a wide ocean. Some traveled for days without food. Some crossed mountains with injured legs. But one by one, they disappeared into safety, leaving behind confusion, fury, and a Nazi nuclear program in ruins. The impact of that single night was enormous. Germany never fully recovered its heavy water supply. The dream of a Nazi atomic bomb faded into frustration and failure. Years later, when the world learned the true power of nuclear weapons, many historians would look back to those frozen Norwegian mountains and realize how close humanity had come to a very different future. These men never called themselves heroes. After the war, many returned to ordinary lives. They became businessmen, workers, fathers, grandfathers. But the world they lived in, the cities that still stood, the generations that were born, all carried the invisible mark of their courage. Think about that for a moment. A handful of skiers in the dark, armed with explosives and belief, stood between the world and a weapon that could have changed everything. No speeches, no medals in the moment. Just cold air, pounding hearts, and a decision to act when it mattered most. If this story gave you chills, if it made you see history not as dates and textbooks, but as living, breathing people who faced impossible odds, then stay with us. There are more hidden missions, more untold heroes, and more moments where the fate of the world rested in the hands of a few. Before you go, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who loves true war stories, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey into history's most daring secrets. The next story is waiting. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.